Thank you so much. First of all, I just wanted to thank Dr. Cook for, first of all, for being flexible. Thank you so much. And for everything you've done for LGBT community at Texas Tech. And also personally wanted to thank all the officers and members of this club. I have to say that it was because of students like you that when I was a student at Tech, it made everything so much easier for me to come out. So I really appreciate what all of you are doing. All right, so I hope that we can have a very interactive discussion about what I want to talk about today. So I'm going to start with a little background about what I do, or I guess my academic background. So my bachelor was chemical engineering with minors of biotechnology and process design. And then I decided to do my master's in biotechnology. So I worked at the Cancer Center in the medical school at TTU-HSC. And then for my PhD, I decided to do biomedical sciences. And my concentration was cell physiology and molecular biophysics, which took me 5 years to learn how to say that correctly. And then what do I do now? I am a protein expression and process development scientist. I work in a biopharmaceutical company here in Austin, and we work on development of new therapeutic antibodies for various diseases, including cancer, stroke, inflammatory diseases, infectious diseases, such as C. difficile, measles, chickenpox, etc. I also consult a cultured meat company. I don't know if you know what cultured meat is, but I included one slide in case you don't know what it is. So they work on briskets. And I also mentor and support a lot of student organizations, including Texas Tech, Animalrights Coalition, and so many other universities, including University of Arizona and UC Berkeley. And just before I move on, I just want to say that also feel free to contact me if there's anything that I can do related to what I do or not. And I'll be actually in Lubbock. I'll be driving tomorrow. So I'll be there for the rest of the week. So if there's anything you wanted to meet up or something, please let me know. Cultured meat is basically when you take stem cells from animals and you grow meat in culture. So it can be a petri dish, bioreactor, incubator, and you basically grow meat out of that. And depending on where the source of this stem cell is, it can be fish, cow, pig, and then you can end up having different types of meat, of course. But there are a lot of reasons that people think this is going to be the future of food, because people get to have that tasty meat that they are used to. It's real meat, and but it doesn't include any of the animal cruelty and environmental impacts and etc. So when I was working on my undergrad, I was working with petroleum a lot, and during that time, the incident in Gulf of Mexico happened, the oil spill. It made me really disgusted about just in general working with petroleum, so I became more aware of environmental stuff. So I changed my minor to biotechnology to work on biofuels, making biofuels from algae. And I founded the Environmental Society at my university. I guess I should have mentioned I went to college back in Iran, so I went to University of Tehran. And here is something that really impacted my life. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of clinic clowning or if you've watched the movie Patch Adams, but it's a movie based on a real character, an American physician who basically wore a red nose and went to hospitals to basically make kids happy as he was treating them. So as a kid, I always was really interested in music, and actually I was also working on a master's in organ performances at Texas Tech School of Music. But I play organ, bagpipes, piano, and a bunch of other instruments. So I always wanted to find a way to use my music in causes that help people. And so in Iran, I actually came across this group and ended up working with Clowns Without Borders. So we basically went to hospitals, we performed for children, and I played the accordion, so that was a perfect fit. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because just working with children suffering from cancer, that was something that really motivated me, because I wanted to do something more than just making them laugh on the spot. I wanted to do something more, and that's why I changed my major to biomedical sciences. And throughout my education in Texas Tech, from my master's and PhD, I kept still using my music, either playing at UMC or raising money for American Cancer Society and local charities. Again, I will tell you the relevance of this. So, like I mentioned, I grew up in Iran, and I can tell you that my biggest, I guess, regret when I look back, I guess it's really not my fault, but like something that makes me upset is, I guess, being in Iran, being in a very oppressive regime where, you know, homosexuality is looked down upon as a sin and is in fact punishable by death. They don't necessarily kill all the gays or all gay people, basically, but the law is there, and if they catch you, then it doesn't look good. So, but worse than that, I wish I knew that I was gay and I just hid it from people, because that was the biggest, I guess, the best kept secret of my life. But it was a little worse than that, because I never even accepted myself. I thought I was mentally sick. I thought that it's not natural. It's because, I don't know, my parents are divorced and I'm closer to my mom. I tried to justify it any way I could. And then, there were times I thought it will go away. I forced myself to have a girlfriend. Didn't work, do not recommend. Looking back, really, until I was like 22 when I came out, that time, that 22 years, living in a society where I could not express myself freely is probably one of the biggest regrets, or one of the things that I deeply feel like I missed in my life. But that also gives me motivation to make sure that other people don't go through the same thing and try to do something about it. I have to say that when I came out, though, it wasn't a huge surprise to a lot of my friends. I don't know why they say because I wore, colorful pants. They said, one of my friends said, I can't find a parrot that matches your style. I don't understand what these two have, the correlation between being gay and wearing colorful pants. But in this case, they weren't wrong, so I can't really complain. So that brings me to this, that why do we even fight for LGBTQI, or any other human rights? So generally, when I ask this in a classroom, we come to a conclusion that it's because we all suffer and we all feel pain, and we have this common thing inside us that we just want to live in a free society, free without, oppression. And I want to go back to where I actually started my, changed my degree to biomedical sciences. I was working on neuroblastoma, which is a rare disease. And I always wanted to help, as many as people as possible. So for that, I was like, okay, what's the number one cause of death? That's probably the most impactful thing that I can do. And you look at the list, which is pretty similar in the world also, but it's, heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes. Then what I learned, they didn't teach me that, but I kind of learned this, and it kind of changed my perspective forever, is that, we all know someone who, suffered or passed away from cardiovascular diseases or diabetes or, one of the cancers. But what if I told you that 80%, 90% of these incidences can be actually prevented? And if you're wondering what the answer to that is, I learned that the answer is plant-based diet. And in fact, antibiotic-resistant species is one of the hottest topics in biomedical sciences. And in fact, one of the major contributors to that is animal agriculture and basically using animals as a source of food. And then also I got into the whole environmental impacts of animal agriculture, knowing that, for instance, I always talk about global warming, not knowing that the contribution to global warming from factory farms is more than all transportation in the world combined. And that factory farming is a major cause of deforestation, water consumption, and all that. And then this is how I came across veganism, knowing that, reading articles such as veganism could save the world. Scientists urge people to drop meat and dairy and veganism as the biggest way to reduce our environmental impact. However, today I'm not here to talk about these stats. I just want to talk about the relationship between LGBT rights, human rights, and animal rights. And that's because I think I have a unique perspective, since I always care about the environment, public health and biomedicine, animal protection, and also my personal experience as a gay man growing up in Iran, and also as an immigrant, I think you don't need to know, you don't need me to tell you that when you immigrate, coming from Iran really doesn't help your case ever. And to date, I still suffer from that. So I hope that you can give what I say today an open mind. And I know that some of this can be new ideas, but please bear with me. So this is me as a kid. I had this chicken, and the chicken grew up to become this rooster. And throughout these years, my face looks like a potato. So ignore that. But also, we had this really cute puppy that I really liked. His name was Shiru. And I find these pictures really interesting when I look back. So I guess the question I have from you is that, can you think about an animal that you cared about in the past and ask yourself, how far will you go to protect that animal, to spend more time with them, to make sure that they don't suffer, to make sure they are not abused and oppressed? So clearly we recognize that these animals are not humans and they're very different than us, but part of us understands that our differences are not relevant to the way they have to be treated, and they're still worthy of our moral consideration. So I think you know where I'm going with this. Something that I find really interesting is that day when I had my favorite dog besides me, I was eating another animal at that table. And another interesting thing is that rooster was kind of loud, so my grandma was taking care of him. And one day she told me that the door was open and the rooster ran away, and for weeks I was going around the neighborhood to find him because I was worried that he gets hit by a car or something. Until years later, when my mom said the chicken soup I had that day was made from him, and it made me extremely upset. So that's bad, but what's even worse is that I knew that I had chicken soup, but I wasn't upset because it wasn't that chicken, it was some other chicken. Which brings the question, how is that even morally relevant? How is my chicken, my relationship with my chicken should impact the way, the chicken I was eating, how much they suffered? And you notice that, in this case, like we look at pigs and their children and their babies as bacon. We look at them as food, but dogs as companion animals. Or chickens, I'm showing you a chicken nugget. A lot of you may find that tasty, but at the same time, if you have some sort of personal connection with chickens, then you don't find that tasty. So I find this odd. So what really happens is that it clicks in your brain when you stop looking at these animals as food and you see them as sentient beings, meaning that they are animals with the capacity to feel pleasure and pain. And so you look at this picture right now, you think it's tasty, but what if I showed you that this is Chick-fil-A, right? So immediately a part of you knows that you look beyond the taste. You think about every horrible thing that Chick-fil-A does in terms of against LGBT movement, and suddenly you don't want to support this. So you see my point? It's not about the taste. It's about what we know about where our food comes from. It's about the oppression. Hopefully a lot of us don't support Chick-fil-A, for instance, because we don't want to support oppression, and that's exactly my point. So again, why LGBTQIA rights? I guess the question is, what are the qualities of a society that we want to live in? What kind of values do we want to have in this society? And generally, when I ask this in the classroom, I get answers such as, we all seek equality or being treated fairly despite our differences. I think it's very clear that, as a gay person, I'm very different than a straight person. But what we have to realize is that our differences should not be an excuse for us to be treated differently. And I think we are all on the same page about this. So something I really like is this saying that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So my question is, do you think as a society, as a whole, we can be free if a group of us is not free and is oppressed? And imagine you're living in a place where 99% are dominated, abused, objectified, and in that society, do you think it's possible to be free and, when majority of us are oppressed, 99%. And I personally think we can't end injustice when we are living in such society, and that's why I'm talking about this today. So, today I'm here to talk about that 99% because they're voiceless. I have a voice, I can tell you about my story, but these animals can't. And that's why I became an animal rights activist, and I'm using my voice and pretty much any opportunity I have to raise awareness about this topic. So I want to show you something. Don't mean to, kill the vibe. It might be disturbing, but I encourage you, in fact, I beg you to watch this, because I think it's our duty to look at these victims and then decide if we want to be a part of this or not. And last night I had to go through hours of this footage to just make it really short for you. But without this, you can't understand what I'm talking about. So if you can't watch it, I can tell you when it's done. But please do, because I think it's very important. We are students, we are teachers, and it's our duty to learn more and act accordingly. Here we go. Alrighty, thank you so much for looking at it, if you did. I guess the question I have is that what do you think is a common root of what you saw and other forms of oppression? So I think as long as we oppress animals, you and I will be still oppressed, and other form of oppression will thrive. And only when we stop oppressing the most vulnerable and voiceless, only then we can live in a truly free society. And remember that every form of discrimination starts by saying that, oh, they don't look like us and they're the other, and because they don't look like us, therefore we are superior, they're inferior, and that gives us the right to oppress and abuse them. And in fact, I kind of expect more from LGBT folks because I think all of us have, experienced oppression. We know what it's like to be treated differently for who we are. And because of that, I always expect that LGBT folks be more sensitive to other people's or other animals' oppression, which has to be the case in my experience. This is a quote from this German philosopher that Auschwitz begins wherever someone looks at a slaughterhouse and thinks, oh, they are just only animals. And he actually argues that humans degrade, exploit, and willfully murder other people once they consider to be animal-like. So genocides can happen when we think of members of other groups as outgroups and to be considerably less human-like than ourselves. So I think as long as we discriminate against other sentient beings because of our differences, we cannot really say that we are living in a free society. I'm almost done, but I just wanted to tell you that what is the solution and why do we do this to begin with, and what is the solution to that? So most of us just don't even think about this, so including myself, we just don't know what's happening. A lot of us love animals, but we grow up in a society that makes us very insensitive to their suffering. A lot of us think that it's natural, normal, and it's necessary. Some of us think that it's tradition, culture, historical basis. There's a historical basis, habit. But if we really be honest, we know that it's because they really taste good under our teeth. We basically do this for a sandwich. And I think what you saw on that footage, none of this is a good excuse to justify what we are doing to these animals. And what is the alternative? As I mentioned, veganism. And veganism, by definition, is a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, this is the key, as far as possible and practical, all forms of exploitations and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and other purposes. And by extension, promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. In very simple words, needless killing and suffering, bad. So that's why I said it's a key. So veganism is reducing unnecessary and needless suffering as much as possible and practical. And we all have options and we should act accordingly. Again, what is the root of homophobia, racism, sexism? It's that men are superior, women are inferior. Straight people are superior, lesbians are inferior, and so on. And all I want to do is to extend this to non-human animals. We think human animals are superior, non-human animals inferior. We know men and women on average have different physical attributes, but we also understand that these differences are not morally relevant, and we all deserve to have rights and not be oppressed. I think having differences is not a good excuse to oppress and exploit others, and in some ways we are all different. But in one way we are all the same, and that's our capacity to feel pain and to suffer. And I think that's where we have to focus on. And why am I talking to you about this right now? Because I think it's a moral urgency. If I went to the streets and asked people, do you think if you poke me in the eye, I suffer as much as if you poke, a dog or a cow? The answer is yes, but people still ignore their suffering. If I say, do you think me as a gay person can suffer the same amount as a straight person, no one is going to argue that. But we still have to have discussions about whether these animals should we still consider them as worthy of our compassion. So that's why I think it's a moral urgency, and people are not talking about it, and that's why I'm talking about this to you now. And that brings me to my second regret, which is even when I came out and started my LGBT activism, I was still personally causing the oppression of other animals unknowingly. And, therefore I was contributing to human and LGBT oppression. Why? Because I was normalizing discrimination against other groups because they looked different than me. And basically all I'm saying is that my actions and values were not aligned. And what do you call a person whose actions and values are not aligned? We call them hypocrite, right? So I was a hypocrite. And to not be that, there was only one way for me, and that was with becoming vegan. I'm almost done. Just wanted to show you that when you think about veganism, you probably think that you have to eat vegetables for the rest of your life. But I wanted to say that it makes minimum difference in your life. You get your pizza, you get your even vegan egg, omelet. You can do all of that in Lubbock too. I actually became vegan in Lubbock. And you get all your cheeses. You have tons of different plant-based milks from oat, hemp, cashew, almonds, rice, all that. And so you have all these options so that you don't buy dairy and, contribute to dairy cows suffering. If you're a fan of ice cream, even, Ben & Jerry's has a bunch of vegan, dairy-free ice creams. You get your burgers, Impossible. You get your Beyond Burger. You get sausage, turkey, crab cakes, meatballs, and even fish fillet, right? So you get everything that you want. And I know you're going to have questions. People ask, why is it moral for lions to hunt and not for us? Well, because they don't have a moral compass. They also do other things. They lick themselves. Are we going to set them as example of our morality? Or, what about plants? They have feelings. No, they don't. But I know that you have questions, but all I'm asking is to take your time and do research and consider this seriously. I'm here if you need any help. Google is your best friend. But I genuinely believe that once you know the why, the how is easy. So you'll figure it out. You just have to realize that the connection that I see between oppressing animals and LGBT rights, and you'll be set. As one of my friends always says, if you think going vegan is hard, put yourself in place of those animals. If your solution that you're offering is to reduce meat consumption, meatless Mondays, things like that, think about any other form of oppression and ask yourself if you offer that as a solution to any form of oppression. Like if I beat my children, would you come to me and say, just try to beat your children one day less in a week? We don't accept that as a solution when it comes to oppression of others. It's very black and white. And so is this. Thank you so much, everyone. I know what I said was maybe provoking, maybe new ideas, but I really appreciate your time.